Chapter 23, the parasites of medical importance. Parasites of humans. Okay. Parasitology is the study of eukaryotic parasites. Okay. You have protozoa, which are unicellular animal-like organisms, and you have helminths. Okay. Those are your worms. Okay. These parasites cause 20% of all the infectious diseases that we have. So 1/5 of every disease is caused by a parasite. They're less prevalent in industrial countries, increasingly common in AIDS patients because of the compromised immune system in AIDS patients. All right, so major protozoan pathogens are single-celled, they're animal-like microbes, most having some form of motility, able to move around. Estimated about 100,000 species, okay? And about 25 are important pathogens out of that 100,000 species. Their life cycles vary. Most propagate by simple asexual cell division, okay, of the active feeding cell, which is a trophozoite. Many undergo formation of the cyst in its sexual cycle, reproduction cycle. Others have a complex life cycle that includes asexual and sexual phases when you mix genetic material. This is a list of what we're going to cover today. These are just the different organisms that you have in this column here. Okay, the different areas they affect, like this affects the nervous muscular system, gastrointestinal system, urogenital system. Okay, same thing here. Different organisms we're going to go over. Okay, and these are the major pathogenic protozoan infections and their primary sources of them. Like the amoeboid ones, amoebiasis, are gastrointestinal tract, and the rest are found in humans, water, and food. And so we'll go through these as we go along here. You've got different lists. Giardiasis, like Giardia, okay, affects your gastrointestinal tract. There's zoonotic, so transferred from different species of animals to humans, and they're found in water and food. Trichomoniasis, trichinosis is the urogenital tract, and that's in humans, and so forth. We'll get through all those here. Okay. This is a guideline for your anti-protozoan drugs. We used to treat them. The different infectious agents like Entomobia histolytica, amoebiasis is your typical infection. Metronidazole is the drug of choice for treating that. And this is what it does, what the drug does to the person. Specific for the anaerobes, inhibits DNA repair. Okay, we are familiar with malaria, chloroquinone. Again, one of the treatments was against when COVID first came out. One of the big treatments was hydroquinone. One drug used for malaria. It interferes with metabolism and use of hemoglobin. Okay, so it goes through the different drugs that we use, different types of infections, and we'll go through all that. So Entomobia histolytica and amoebiasis, this alternates between a large motile trophozoite and a smaller non-motile cyst. So this is the active form. This is a cystic form where it's not feeding or anything, but it's used to transit between hosts. The trophozoite has a large nucleus and lacks most other organelles. The mature cyst is encased in a thin, tough wall, contains 4 nuclei and bodies called chromatoidals, which are a dense cluster of ribosomes. Okay. So the amoebiasis, the cysts are eaten. Okay, they enter into the digestive tract. They pass through the stomach. Okay, the trophozoites release into the small intestine. So they release from the cyst, then they come out into the trophozoite phase, which they start to feed. Okay, the trophozoites insist into the large intestine. Okay, the cysts are then released into the feces and transferred onto the next species. So it's 2 different forms as it's in the human body. This is the trophozoite form. This is the active form, 1 large nucleus. Okay, it incorporates red blood cells inside of it. Okay, then it comes into the mature cyst, which is 4 nuclei and chromatoidals, which is your ribosomes. Okay. Then an exocyst, and then this is released from the body through fecal matter. Okay. These are back inhaled into the next host, respiratory system, goes into the large intestine and starts over again. And it affects multiple humans, multiple organisms the same way. Okay. The epidemiology, okay. Humans are the primary hosts for these. The cysts are swallowed, like we said, arrive at the small intestine. Alkaline pH and digestive juices stimulate the cysts to release the 4 trophozoites. Remember, there's 4 nuclei, 1 nuclei for each trophozoite. The trophozoites attach, multiply, actually move about, and feed. Okay, that's the part of the infection. Again, the same picture we just had. And it shows each one goes to the cyst form. Then inside the small intestine, large intestine, trophozoites are released. And then they start to feed and multiply. The pathogenesis, they're asymptomatic in about 90% of the patients. So 9% don't know they have them. Amoeba may secrete enzymes that dissolve tissues and penetrate deeper layers of the mucosa. This will cause dysentery, abdominal pain, fever, diarrhea, weight loss. It's carried by about 10% of the world population. So these amoeboid parasites are in 10% of the entire world's population. So 1 out of 10 people in the entire world carries these pathogens. This is the erosion of the intestines. You can see where the intestinal lining has been pitted and eroded here from as these parasites embed themselves into the intestine. Okay. Control of it. Their life-threatening manifestations are hemorrhaging, perforations, appendicitis, and tumor-like growths and amoebomas. Okay. They may invade your liver or your lung. Severe forms of this disease are 10% fatality rate. Initial diagnosis by microscopic examination of a fecal smear for the presence of trophozoites or the cysts as they're being released. Treatment: metronidazole, tinidazole, and paromomycin, or nitazoxanide. Okay, those are all the treatments for this Echinacea histolytica. This would look like on the microscope. You see the nuclei in the cyst form. Okay, you see how they invade into the cells on the microscope picture. So amoebic infection of the brain, okay, are caused by Naegleria fowleri. Okay, acanthamoebia ordinarily inhabit standing water. The primary acute meningoencephalitis is acquired through nasal contact with water or traumatic eye injury. Once it infiltrates the brain, that's usually going to be fatal. And you can see how it affects the different nerves running through here. You see how it's infected onto our nerve endings here. You see the vacuoles inside on those microscopic pictures of them. Intestinal ciliate, Balantidium coli. It's an occupant of the intestines of domestic animals like pigs and cattle. Okay, it's acquired by ingesting cyst-containing food or water. The trophozoite erodes the intestines and elicits intestinal symptoms and rarely penetrates the intestine. This is the Balantidium coli. You can see the macronucleus, the large nucleus. Okay, this is the trophozoite stage. This is the mature cyst. You can see the big difference. Well, this one has a micronucleus, small one. They both have vacuoles. They have the cystome and the trophozoite. The main difference is these cilia tufts. On the outside is all these little cilia. So this can move around and increase their surface area. The mature cyst, the cell's not undergoing metabolism. So there's no need for surface area to absorb everything or move around. So this has a cyst wall. So the mature cyst has no cilia on the outside. Okay. The trophozoite layer has cilia on the outside. Okay. Intestinal ciliate, Balantidium coli. Again, these parasites grow only under anaerobic conditions, okay, without oxygen, in the presence of the host bacteria microbiota. Okay, healthy humans to this are resistant. Okay, treatment is tetracycline, iodoquinol, nitrimidazine, or metronidazole. So, Entamoeba histolytica, it primarily invades, does it invade your liver, your large intestine, your small intestine, or the lungs?
Was it the large intestine?
It was the small intestine.
Oh, yeah. Small.
Yeah, invades into the small intestine. That's what it adheres to. Let me go back a little. That was the intestine. Mucosa. Yeah, here we go. The cysts are swallowed and arrive at the small intestine. In the small intestine, the alkaline pH that's reduced to stimulate cysts to release the trophozoite in that area. That's where they attach. So they invade into the small intestine.
So they're like little, that's crazy how you can get it from just standing water.
Yep, standing water because they grow in standing water.
That's crazy.
Yep. That's when you ever drink out in the, when you're backpacking stuff, they always say to drink from running water. You never drink from standing water. But that's where these can grow and develop. And come into the small intestine. Trichomonids are Trichomonasis species. They're small parasite protozoa. There's 4 anterior flagella and an undulating membrane. Okay, exists only in trophozoite forms. They don't have a cyst form. There's 3 that infect humans. There's Trichomonas vaginalis, Trichomonas tetanus, and Trichomonas hominis. The different Trichomonas species, here's the flagella. You have an undulating membrane, and the membrane shifts and allows it to kind of wave in the breeze. Has a nucleus inside. Here's your flagella coming out that only the anterior portion. And there's one coming out. This is axial style, comes out the end of it here. That's what they look like under microscope background. You see how that membrane folds around. You see the flagella, multiple fellows in the anterior region with one, the axial style at the posterior section. And you can see the one flagella coming out, undulating membrane, and the flagella at the top. Small different shapes there. Trichomonas vaginalis causes a sexually transmitted disease called trichomoniasis. Okay. Reservoir is human urogenital tract. 50% of people infected are asymptomatic. They're a strict parasite. They cannot survive outside the host, but they don't have a cyst form. Okay. There's 3 million cases yearly, so it's one of the very top STDs. Female symptoms: foul smelling, green to yellow discharge, vulvitis, cervicitis, and urinary frequency and pain. Male symptoms: urethritis, thin, milky discharge, occasionally prostate infections from that. Treatment is oral or vaginal, metronidazole. Metronidazole. Giardia intestinals and giardiasis. Okay, those are pathogenic flagellate. Okay? They're unique symmetrical heart shape with a concave ventral surface that act like a suction cup. The cysts are small, compact, and multinucleate, just like the other ones were. Reservoirs include beavers, cattle, cats, and humans, coyotes, cats and humans. So cysts can survive on their own for 2 months in environment. So once they're outside the host, the cysts can still survive for up to 2 months. Okay, this is Giardia intestinalis. You can see the nucleus. You can see the ventral depression, which is a heart-shaped little suction cup there they can adhere to, like there. Again, this is a trophozoite form, the active feeding form. And this is a cyst form with the multiple nuclei inside. The cyst form is easily identified because it's multinuclear, usually 4 nuclei, and the flagella and the cilia don't appear on the outside. It's a cell wall. It seals it up. That's the easiest way to tell between the two. It's usually ingested within water and food. IDs 10 to 100 cysts. The cysts enter the duodenum. They germinate there. They travel to the jejunum to feed and multiply. That's all in the small intestine still. Remember, cysts enter the duodenum, because stomach goes to the duodenum. Duodenum goes to the jejunum, and jejunum goes to the ileum. Those are the three portions of the small intestine: duodenum, jejunum, and the ileum. Okay, but they adhere into the small intestine. They cause giardiasis, okay, diarrhea, and abdominal pain. Diagnosis is difficult because organism is shed in feces intermittently. So sometimes it's just going on, so it's hard to diagnose it sometimes. Treatment is quinacrine and metronidazole. Agent is killed off by boiling the water, ozone treatment, or iodine treatment. So any of those treatments in the water supply, whether you boil it, expose it to ozone, which is a modified form of oxygen molecule, or iodine. And that's what they look like. The hemoflagellants, these are vector-borne blood parasites. They're oligoparasites that live in the blood and the tissues of human host. They cause life-threatening and debilitating zoonosis across going across different species. They are spread in specific tropical regions by blood-sucking insects. That's what spreads these guys. Okay, it serves as an intermediate host. What happens is a human has it, bit by a mosquito or any kind of blood-sucking insect, and when the insect moves on to another organism, it infects the second organism. So the insects do not get infected by it, but they're carriers of it. They're an intermediate host. They have complicated life cycles that undergo morphological changes, categorized according to their cellular and infective stages. Members of this group include trypanosoma and leishmania. The hemoflagellate stages, there's 4 different stages. The Amos stygote, which is the form lacking a free flagellum. The promastigote is the stage bearing a single flagellum. The epimastigote is the flagella stage with multiple ones. And the tryptomastigote is a large, fully formed stage. So those are the 4 stages of the hemoflagellates: amastygote, promastygote, epimastygote, and trypomastygote. So there's your different stages: amastygote, promastygote, epimastygote, and trimastygote. Okay. And these are how the different species react to it. Leishmania here is the mastigote is intercellular in humans, found in the sandfly gut, which infects humans, does not occur in either of the 2 last stages. The brucea does not occur in either of the first 2 stages, but it's present in the salivary glands of tsetse flies. It's present in the salivary glands because when it bites, that's how it gets transferred. So a lot of these parasites are present in the salivary glands. Okay? And in body mouth parts of the tsetse fly, and it's very infective to humans. Right? Same with some of the other ones here. And these are the 4 stages we talked about. A mastigote, no flagella on the outside. Promastigote, the flagella has unicellular and it's just starting to develop, get anchored in. Epimastigote is starting to feed into the body of it, become throughout it. And the trypomastigote, you can see it incorporates the whole thing as well as it matures. So those are your 4 different stages of the hemoflagellates. Trypanosoma, okay, and trypanosomiasis. Trypanosoma species are distinguished by their infective stages. The trypomastigote, which is one where the flagella is completely embedded in the whole thing, it's mature. The trypomastigote is an elongate, spindle-shaped cell with tapered ends, like an eel-like motility, moves like an eel, moves throughout the species of bending and winding. 2 types of trypanosomiasis are T. ricea, which is the African sleeping sickness, and T. krusei, which is Chagas disease, endemic to Central and South America. Trypanosoma brucei, and is spread by the tsetse fly. There's 2 variants of the disease caused by 2 subspecies. TB gambiense is a Gambinian strain in West Africa, and TB rhodocina is a Rhodesian strain Okay, the biting of the tsetse fly inoculates the skin with trypomastigotes, okay, which multiplies in the blood, damages your spleen, your lymph nodes, and into the brain. Okay, Trypanosoma brucei, which is your sleeping sickness, shows you the areas where it's located. Okay, so parts of Africa. Okay, and we get, this is the distribution of it. The tsetse fly and bites, enters the circulation. Okay, and in fact, it can infect up into the brain of the infected person. Okay, so the distribution we saw, the African, the saliva of the flies infected with T. brucei inoculates the human bloodstream. The parasite matures and invades different various organs. In time, its human effects cause central nervous system damage. Okay, the trypsosome is spread to other hosts through another fly. In its alimentary tract, the parasite completes a series of developmental stages. That's how it gets transferred, using humans as another intermediate here too. Trypsosoma brucei again is harbored by mammals. It's a chronic disease. Symptoms are sleep disturbances. That's what's called sleeping sickness. You have tremors at night, paralysis, and eventually coma as it affects the brain tissues and nervous system. Diagnosis: trypanosomes are really demonstrated in blood. So you take a sample of the blood, you'll find the trypsosomes, spinal fluid, and lymph nodes. Treatment: before neurologic involvement, milasoprol, eflornithine. Control involves controlling it, involves just eliminating the tsetse fly. If you get rid of the tsetse fly, you get rid of its vector, how it's being spread. Okay. Trypanosoma cruzi is Chagas disease. It's a red uvid bug, okay, which is called the kissing bug. Central and South America, Mexico, and southern part of the United States. Infection occurred when bug feces are inoculated into a cutaneous portal, into an opening. Local lesions, fever, swelling, lymph nodes, spleen, and the liver. That's what it affects. And you can see the locations of it here up in the southern part of the United States and down through Africa. Okay, this is a cycle that goes through wild animals, comes into domestic animals, and it gets bite into an open portal, like the mouth, bites around the mouth, the edge, it goes into the human. Okay, and that's the reduvid bug, and then cycles back out into the wild animals, then completes that circle back again. And the heart muscles and large intestines harbor masses of mastigotes. That's your first stage. That's your with no flagella. Chronic inflammation occurs in the organs, especially your heart and your brain. There could be the heart and the brain. And treatment is nifurtimox and benzodiazole. Okay, you can see the bite marks by the mouth, the lips, so it can come into, oh, that's the opening portal for it. Right? And you can see that this is cardiac muscle. Okay, you can see the different, remember that they're circled with no flagella. You can see them embedded into the cardiac muscle. Leishmania species and Leishmaniasis. Leishmaniasis is a zoonosis transmitted disease among mammals. It's hosted by female sandflies, require a blood meal to produce their eggs, endemic to the equatorial regions of the equator. Okay. Promastigotes are injected by the sandfly bite. They convert a mastigote to a mastigote there, and then they multiply. If a macrophage does not migrate, the infection is localized. Okay, it becomes systemic if the macrophage migrates. Here's your sandfly, bites on the person, human or other mammal. Macrophages absorb the promastigotes. Okay, any infection, they absorb it up here. If the macrophages stay in this area, and then they release the free mastigotes as they mature, then the infection stays localized. If they go into the bloodstream and migrate, then the macrophages are released into the new area, the lungs or the liver or the heart, wherever they end up going. And then the infection becomes systemic. Right. Okay, there are cutaneous oriental sores. They're also called the Baghdad boil from their location. Those are localized ulcerated sores that develop. Espundia, or skin and mucous membrane infections of the head and become a chronic infection. Systemic visceral infections are high intermittent fever, weight loss, enlarged spleen, enlarged liver, and enlarged lymph nodes. Kala-azar is the most severe and fatal form if left untreated. And that's what they look like. You can see the ulcerated lesions on the hand here. So the hemoflagellates are transmitted by contaminated water, insect vectors, bug feces, or contaminated food. Which one?
They're aren't they blood-borne vectors like insects?
Yeah, they're usually blood-sucking disease, an insect with a blood-sucking insect that would do it. Yep, insect vectors, because they withdraw the blood out and transfer to the organism. Perfect. So they're insect vectors, any blood-sucking vectors. Apocomplexan parasites, sporosans. They lack motor organelles in the trophozoite state. Okay, they alternate between sexual and asexual phases and between different animal hosts. Okay, they form specialized infected bodies that are transmitted by the arthropod vectors, which are your insects. Okay, food, water, or other means. Okay, so this is transmitted by all types of vectors. The arthropod vectors by food, by water, and those use Plasmodium, Toxoplasma, and Cryptosporidium. Okay, the Plasmodium are the agents of malaria. Malaria is one of the very popular diseases. Affects a lot of people. Obligate intracellular sporozoan, and these are some of the different species that do cause malaria. The female Anopheles is a primary vector for malaria. Blood transfusions can also cause malaria. You can transmit the pathogen or the parasite, sorry. You can transfer the parasite through blood transfusion, or it can be passed from mother to fetus across the placenta barrier. Now, for malaria, there's 300 to 500 million new cases every year. Okay, 2 million deaths per year. I mean, we're talking COVID is a major pandemic and it's killed 200,000. This thing kills 2 million people every year. Big. This is a huge disease. And you can see the area where it's located.
I have a question about malaria though. So how is it so frequent? Like, I don't understand. Is it because of the mosquitoes?
Yep.
Or-
It's the mosquito vector. And look at the area where it's localized. Central America, Africa, areas where there's lots of mosquitoes, lots of standing water, and the infection rates are tremendously high. Infected waters and everything else out there. And it is spread, once it gets in those mosquitoes, it spreads throughout. Now, you know how common mosquito bites are.
Yes, I have one new every day. I feel like we have a new strain. I was looking at it. There's like a new one called the Asian black mosquito, and they're little tiny things.
Oh, are they?
They're called the Asian black mosquito. I don't know if you've seen them, but they're like little tiny ones.
No, I haven't. Have to look those up.
Anyway, I've seen a few in my room and they're vicious. Like every day I have a new bite.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, and I mean, it's so easy to transmit that way. It's just such a common way to transmit. It's hard to stop. It's real common diseases. The malaria life cycle has an asexual phase in humans. So the infected female mosquito injects asexual sporozoites, which travel to the liver. The schizogony is your asexual division, generates merozoites. that enter the circulation in 5 to 16 days, depending on what species it is. The merozytes attach to and enter the red blood cells. So malaria affects your red blood cells. You convert to trophocytes and multiply. The red blood cells burst, releasing the merozytes that differentiate into gametes. The gametes can form a sexual response now, where they can mix chromosomes and respond to it. Okay. Now this is attacking your red blood cells. Now remember, a lot of those areas that we looked at, sickle cell anemia is real common there as a disease. The disease hasn't been genetically wiped out because with patients with the carriers of sickle cell anemia are resistant to malaria. So there's an advantage to being a carrier. If you have sickle cell anemia, it's still a fatal disease. But if you're the carrier of it, which means you only have partially disformed red blood cells, the malaria can't take effect in it, which is why it still exists. So the sexual phase now comes across. Mosquito draws infected red blood cells. Gametes fertilize, forming what's called diploids, which form sporocytes in the stomach. The sporocytes lodge in the salivary glands and develop to infect the human host. So as the mosquito bites, the salivary glands have the parasite from the diploid cells. The sporocytes come from the stomach of it into its salivary gland. So it can be transmitted into the human host when it bites. Okay, so the asexual phase. Okay, so during the phase in humans, sporocytes enter a capillary with the saliva from the feeding mosquito. Remember, the sporocytes are up here in the salivary glands. So when it bites, salivary glands release the sporocyte up into under the skin or up under the epithelium. Okay, then the second step after it enters the exoteric phase, sporocytes invade the cells of the liver, undergo division, and release large number of merozytes. Okay, so it goes into the liver, stores up in the liver, and then bursts open and releases these merozytes. The erythrolytic phase, merozytes enter the circulation and invade the red blood cells. Now they come from the liver, open up, and then these enter into the red blood cells. Okay, this infection gives rise to a prominent phase, which is the ring trophocyte. You can see the different ring structures here. You can see it looks like a figure 8. You can see the ring structures inside these red blood cells. These are all these little ring structures, and these are the gamocytes being formed, your diploid cells. Okay. And schistogonia of this form produces additional merozytes that burst out and continue the infection cycle. Okay. Gamocytic phase, some of the blood cells enter the sexual cycle, giving rise to the male and female gamocytes, which infect another mosquito. When fed upon the blood, these mixed chromosomes become a sexual multiplication, mixing of the chromosomes, the DNA material, and then store from the intestines back into the mosquito, into the salivary glands. So they come up here, and the final development occurs in the mosquito. It involves complex that ultimately produce the infectious sporocyte, which migrates into the salivary glands. That's the life cycle of malaria. So, and again, the asexual phase, okay, the sporocytes enter a capillary with the saliva of the feeding mosquito. Remember, it's in the salivary gland. Okay, the exoerythrolytic phase, sporocytes invade the cells of the liver, start to undergo division, and release a large number of the merozytes. The erythrocytic phase, the merozytes enter the circulation, and they go into red blood cells. You know, prominent phase is the ring trophocyte in the blood cells. The schizogony of this form produces additional merozytes that burst out and continue the infection cycle. The gametocyte phase, some of the red blood cells enter the sexual cycle, which gives rise to the male and female gametocytes, which infect another mosquito when it feeds on the blood. Then you get the sexual phase, where the final development occurs in the mosquito. But this is a second one that's been infected. It involves the stage that ovary produces the infectious sporocyte over again into the salivary gland. So pathogenesis of malaria. Symptoms include episodes of chills, fever, sweating, anemia, organ enlargement, your heart, your liver. Symptoms occur 48 hours to 72 hours, so 2 to 3 days after the red blood cells rupture and produce the parasite into the bloodstream. Okay. The P. falciparum is the most malignant type of malaria. has the highest death rate in children. They're diagnosed by the treatment of the trophocytes in the red blood cells. That's one of its symptoms. An increasing drug resistance for malaria. The therapy is chloroquinone or mefloquinone. Right? Diagnosis is the presence of trophocytes inside the red blood cells. Those are the ring structures you see inside of there. Okay, when you do a red blood cell smear, symptoms are recurring chills, fever, and sweating. Treatment are based on the quinine drugs. The chloroquine, when drug resistance is not a problem, we use that. Otherwise, we use Malarone. Okay, our artemisinin-based combination therapy, ACT, is used also for treatment of that. Control, basically, how do we control this disease? We decrease the number of mosquitoes. And we give human parallel, we give them antibodies. So if they do get infected, they can start fighting the infection faster of this pathogen, of this parasite. Vaccination is very difficult to develop. Okay, we don't really have a really good vaccine for it. Most advanced vaccine targets to prevent liver infection. And that's one way we control it. Mosquito netting keeps mosquitoes away at night. Cocodian parasites, zoonotic in domestic animals and birds, can cause severe diseases in humans. They exist in several stages, including dormant oocysts and pseudocysts. Okay. Toxoplasma gondii, toxoplasmosis, okay, intracellular apical complexan parasites with extensive distribution. They live naturally in cats that harbor oocytes in their digestive tract. Okay. Acquired by ingesting raw meat or substances contaminated by cat feces. Most cases of toxoplasmosis go unnoticed, except in fetuses, where we don't have a developed immune system, and AIDS patients who have a very severely limited immune system. Okay? AIDS patients can suffer brain and heart damage from toxoplasmosis. Treatment is pyrimethamine and sulfadiazine. Toxoplasmosis, again, you got your carrier from cats. You have the asexual phase with the oocytes, continue breathed in by the humans. Okay, then you can turn it back to the wild animals, back to the domestic animals, and back again into the humans. So it has their cycle. But it's spread through cats. That's why they tell pregnant women to avoid changing cat litter and things like that. Sarcocytis is a parasite of cattle, pigs, and sheep. Domestic animals are intermediate hosts. They pick up the infective cyst while grazing on grass that's contaminated with human feces. Humans are infected when you consume the meat of an animal that has been contaminated by human feces from the infective cyst. Sarcocystosis includes symptoms of include diarrhea, nausea, abdominal pain. There's no specific treatment for it. Cryptosporidium, it's another intestinal pathogen. Infects a variety of mammals, birds, and reptiles. Causes intestinal disease, causes cryptosporidosis. Organisms exist in tissues and oocysts. Okay, in the 1990s, there were 370,000 cases in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, due to a contaminated water. Okay, 370,000 cases because of contaminated water. In just one city. Filtration is required for removal of it. Okay. This is the spores you see on the outside of the epithelium here, not on the intestinal epithelium, and it can transmit into that, causing disruption in your intestinal tract. So ingestion of oocytes give rise to sporozoites that penetrate intestinal cells, causes gastroenteritis, headaches, sweating, vomiting, abdominal cramps, and diarrhea. AIDS patients may suffer chronic persistent diarrhea because of this, and then no effective drugs for treatment of it. This is what they look like here. This is the sporocysts, including in the cells. They transmit in through the intestinal cells. Cystospora belli and coccidiosis. This is intracellular intestinal parasite with an oocyst stage, transmitted in fecally contaminated food or drink and through laboratory contact. Coccidiosis, infection usually asymptomatic or self-limiting. Symptoms usually include malaise, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, fatty stools, abdominal cramping, and weight loss. Pretty much the same for all of them. Treatment, sulfadiazine and permethamine when it's required. Okay. Emerging protozoan pathogen causes cyclosporiasis. Okay, this is a Cyclospora caetaniasis. Oral fecal transmission, fresh produce and water. Oocytes enter the small intestines and invade the mucosa. Symptoms of watery diarrhea, stomach cramps, bloating, fever, and muscle aches. Diagnosis can be complicated. Treatment is trimethoprim and sulfamethoxidazole. Babesia species. Babesiosis is the first protozoan found to cause a disease. Okay, that's red water fever of cattle. It's the first protozoan found associated with a vector. This vector is a tick. Human babesiosis is relatively rare zoonosis associated with infected rodents, and its infection resembles malaria. Infection resembles the malaria. All right, a person can acquire clactotrimosis from which of these forms? Pseudocyst in raw meat, oocyst in the air, cleaning out the cat litter box, or all of the above. What would we say?
I was gonna say, was it C?
It will definitely see clean out the cat box, but it can also be, because we clean out cat box, you put oocysts in the air. That's what you get it from the cat litter box from cats. And it can also be from a pseudocyst in raw meat. So it would be all of the above. But you're right, cleaning out cat litter boxes puts those oocysts in the air from the cat feces, and you breathe them in. Okay, it can also be caused by what's in the raw meat. So it can be any of these
Okay.
for toxoplasmosis. That's why they tell pregnant women not to clean out cat litter boxes. Like we say, because you can get it from the inhalation of the oocysts from the cat fecal matter. Make sense?
Yes, it does.
All right. So survey of helminths parasites. Those are the worm parasites. Adults are large, multicellular animals with specialized tissues and organs. Adult worms mate, produce fertilized eggs that hatch. The larvae then mature in several stages to adults. The sexes may separate or hermaphroditic, may be part of the same organism. Adulthood and mating occurs in the definitive host. The larval development occurs in the intermediate host. Okay? A transport host experiences no parasitic development. It's just used for the reproduction and goes right back into the host. 4 basic patterns of life and transmission. Okay? These are the major helminths of humans and modes of transmission. This is like roundworms, trichuria here, and it shows you a common name: whipworm, pinworm, hookworms, and their life cycle through humans, and how they're spread by either oral fecal means, fecal pollution of soil with eggs, etc. And again, we'll go through all those as we go on. And the same thing here. This is trying to think of this. We'll come back to it. Filariasis in humans and by mosquito bites, by fly bites. Okay, fecal pollution of soil with eggs, by the threadworm. All right. And the same thing continues here. It shows you the diseases, the lifestyle requirements, and how it's spread to humans. And again, we'll go through all these as we go along here. And these are different types of tapeworm, whether they're beef tapeworms, pork tapeworms, fish tapeworms, or dwarf tapeworm. The different types that are, and it's from undercooked or not cooking the food properly, whether it's beef, pork, or fish. This is 4 different helminth life cycles. This is the first one, cycle A. Okay, in cycle A, the worm develops an intestinal egg, is released with feces in the environment. Eggs are ingested by a new host and hatch in the intestine. Cycle B, the second one. In cycle B, the worms mature in the intestines. The eggs are released with the feces. The larvae hatch and develop in the environment. Infection occurs through skin penetration by the larvae. So it goes into the foot like roundworm. Okay, it enters into the foot. after it comes from the egg and gets developed in the environment. Cycle C, the adult matures in the human intestine. Eggs are released in the environment. Eggs are eaten by grazing animals. The animals become their intermittent host right here. Okay, they do not get infected by the parasite. They're just a host for it as it develops. The larva forms in cyst in the tissue. Humans become the definitive host. Eating animal flesh that are infected causes infections back into the human. And the fourth cycle is the eggs released from the human. Humans are the definitive host and are infected through ingestion or direct penetration by larval phases. Okay, so we can either get infected through piercing the skin or through inhalation, through breathing it in. These are the different types of parasitic helminths, different types of worms, what they cause. Okay. Trichuris we talked about before, that causes muscle pain and it causes diarrhea in the gastrointestinal tract. Dermatitis, myositis. Okay. We're sure here, Bankrupt, that's what I'm trying to think of. It causes elephantitis, which we'll go into that a little bit too. It affects the lymphatic system. It's drainage. Pathology, diagnosis, and control of helminth infestation. Pathology arises from worms feeding on and migrating through tissues, accumulation of worms, and worm products. Diagnosis of it based on blood cell count, eosinophilia, serological testing, the eggs, the larvae, or adult worms in the feces, in the sputum, urine, blood, or tissue biopsies. Treatment, anti-helminthic drugs, suppress the helminth metabolic process that differs from human processors, inhibits the worm's movement, prevents it from taking hold into position, and acts locally in the intestine. That's how we treat them. These are different types of drugs that we have. Albendazole blocks steps in worm metabolism. Okay. Where's some other ones? Yeah, Pyrantel paralyzes worms. They can be expelled in the feces. They can't keep moving the body. Mebendazole, this would no longer, these two are no longer used in the United States. Okay. But these are the different types of worms that we have, like with pinworm, hookworm, and trichinosis. Okay, we're going to use Pyrantel. Nematode or roundworm infestations. This is the most abundant animal group that we have, the roundworms. Vast majority are free-living soil and freshwater worms, but around 200 are parasitic. 50 of those 200 species affect humans. They're elongated, cylindrical with protective cuticles, circular muscles, a complete digestive tract, and separate sexes. Okay, so they're elongated cylindrical worms with protective cuticles. They have circular muscles around them and a complete digestive tract. The digestive tract starts at one end and goes all the way through because this is completely circular. You're gonna have these little segments. We're gonna call them a little bit here, but it's a complete passageway through and through. And then separate male and female worms. The human parasites are divided into intestinal nematodes, and tissue nematodes. The intestinal nematodes, okay, those are to some degree in the intestines. Those are your hookworms. And the tissue nematodes spend their larval and adult phase in various soft tissues other than the intestines. Okay. These are the intestinal nematodes here. Okay, and these are the tissue nematodes here. Okay. Big thing with the tissue ones are your river blindness, your elephantitis, to affect lymphatic systems. Ascaris lumbricoides, okay, a large intestinal roundworm. Most cases in the US occur in the southeastern states. They're indigenous to humans. They spend as larval and adult stages in humans. They release embryonic eggs in their feces, spread to other humans by food, by drink, okay, or contaminated objects, pass from human to human. Ingested eggs hatch into the larva and burrow through the intestine into circulation, travel to the lungs, pharynx, and you swallow. So you reinfect yourself. Adult worms complete life cycle in the intestines and reproduce probably 200,000 eggs a day, which is a tremendous amount. Okay, worms retain motility. They go through but they don't attach. Severe inflammatory reactions mark the migratory route because wherever they've been as they go through, they have an inflammatory reaction. Allergic reactions to these worms can occur. Heavy worm loads can retard physical and mental development. They just too many worms in the way. And this is what they look like. This is what comes out of you. They're not very pretty. Okay. Again, they don't attack, they just travel throughout your body. And when they get in groups like that, they affect your brain, they affect the different organs that they're at, and can cause mental retardation, physical different development, things like that. Okay, whipworm. Whipworm humans are the sole host for whipworm. Okay, Trichuris trichiuria. Trichiuriasis has its highest incidence in the tropics. Eggs hatch in the intestines. The larvae will attach, penetrate the outer wall, and develop into adults. So these ones attach to your surface. Females lay 3,000 to 5,000 eggs daily. Worms can pierce the capillaries, cause localized hemorrhage. Okay, as it breaks through your capillaries, you bleed into those areas. Heavy infestations can cause dysentery, rectal prolapse, and can be fatal in children. Pinworm or seatworm, Enterobiolus vermicularis. That's your pinworm infection. Okay, also called seatworm. Enterobiasis, most common worm disease of children in temperate zones. Eggs are picked up from surroundings and swallowed. After hatching in the small intestines, they develop into adults. Analytic occurs when mature females emerge from the intestine to release eggs. Self-inoculation is common. Once they come out, you get infected again, anal to oral infection, and you get reinfected with them. So humans become infected by which stage of the pinworm's life cycle? Which stage is infected? When we talk about the pinworm, there we go, pinworm right here. Which stage is infected? Eggs are picked up, swallowed. Enterobius common worm disease. Okay.
So eggs.
Eggs are picked up from surroundings and swallowed. So it would be the egg. Right? Yep. Okay. That's the stage of pinworms, like where it's infectious. Because they pick it up, give the egg, it develops as the larva in the adult after it's become attached. Worms. Hookworms are characteristic curved ends and hooked mouths. Okay. Humans shed the eggs in their feces, which hatch into villiform larvae and burrow into the skin of the bare feet. So this one, the eggs go in the feces, and then you step on it. Okay. Now the eggs that can burrow through the skin of your bare feet from the environment. So these are hookworms. These are the male and the female, which are longer. Okay. This is the egg stage in the feces. And you can see the ends of these little hookworms. They're like suction cups on the ends. Hookworms, the larvae travel from the blood to the lungs. They proceed up the lungs, up the bronchi, up into your throat, and then they're swallowed. And they go into the GI tract. The worms mature and reproduce in the small intestine and complete the cycle. Okay, so they travel from they get into your bloodstream, they go to your lungs, they crawl up your lungs, and they crawl down your throat, and you swallow. They go into your stomach, into the small intestine, where they mature. It's kind of interesting life cycle there. Many cause pneumonia, nausea, vomiting, cramps, and blood diarrhea. Blood loss is significant, causing anemia. Okay. The Strongyloides stercoralis is a threadworm. These are tiny roundworms. These roundworms complete life cycle in humans or moist soil. The larvae penetrate the skin and migrate to the lungs. Okay, they become swallowed. Again, same as before, you swallow them, and complete development in the intestines. Can reinfect the same host without leaving the body. Okay. Heavy worm loads can cause pneumonitis, eosinophilia, bloody diarrhea, liver enlargement, bowel obstruction, and malabsorption. Okay. The Trichinia spiralis is entirely within mammalian host. Okay. Larvae are in cyst, animal muscles in infective stages. Okay. So the animal has inside, we have the infected meat, we eat it, it's ingested, the cysts hatch once they're in the intestine and mature in the intestinal lining. Okay. The adult reproduce and form new larvae. These larvae then burrow through the intestine and into circulation. Larvae then form cysts in the skeletal muscles that can can remain for years. Shows that the biopsy right here shows as an invading into the intestinal tract. Trichinella spiralis, trichinosis. Okay, again, the larvae encysted in animals' muscle are the infective stage. When it's ingested in the infective stage, these cysts hatch and mature into the intestinal lining. Adults reproduce and form the new larvae. They burrow through the intestine and enter back into circulation again. Larvae eventually form cysts in skeletal muscle and can remain there for years. Okay. Biopsy shows the human skeletal muscle infected with a coiled larvae of Trichinella spiralis. You can see this is your biopsy here. What you look at, you can see the infected worm right inside the intestinal cells invading through the intestinal layer, epithelium. So we went through the different stages with it. Undercooked pork or bear meat, trichinosis. The larvae migrate from the intestine to the blood vessels, the muscle, heart, brain, where it forms cysts. The first symptoms you got are flu-like diarrhea. Second symptoms are muscle and joint pain, shortness of breath, pronounced eosinophilia. There's no cure after the larvae have encysted themselves. Okay? There's no treatment after that. The tissue nematodes complete their lifestyle in human blood, lymphatics, or skin. Okay. Filarial worms elongate filamentous bodies, spreading by biting arthropods. That's what causes it, like a tick. Causes filariasis, chronic deforming disease. Two species responsible for most filariasis are Wucheria bancrofti, which is causing elephantitis, and Octocara volvulus causes river blindness. Okay, and Lola loa is your eye worm. Okay, those are all different things we'll talk about here in just a second. Wucheria bancrofti, filariasis. This is your topical infection spread by mosquitoes. Okay, the vector deposits larvae, which move into your lymphatic system. Remember, lymphatic system is just your immune system with your lymph drainage, and it goes through the body and brings back into the circulatory system. So chronic infection causes blockage in lymphatic circulation, okay, and it causes elephantitis, massive swelling of the extremities. Now the lymph can't drain. It can't go when you produce it. It goes through, it needs back into the bloodstream. It can't get back in, you block it. So where that block is, the lymph fluid builds up and it causes huge swelling of those areas. You can see both these legs. This is elephantitis. This is where the blockage of lymph drainage occurs and it can't drain out. And this is the parasite that causes that. Onchocerca volvulus, river blindness, transmitted by biting black fleas. Larvae develop into adults in their subcutaneous tissue. The adult female migrates via the blood and it migrates to the eyes. And it's provokes an inflammatory reaction in the eyes. And co-infection with Wallabaccae bacteria causes river blindness. Okay, it causes infection in the eyes and causes blindness. Treatments are tetracycline and ivermectin. Loa loa is the African eyeworm. This is an interesting little guy. It's spread by the bite of very small flies. Temperature-sensitive worms migrate around and under the skin, and they may enter the eye. Now, the treatment of these guys is to pull the worm from a small hole in the conjunctiva. So you make a hole in the eye, and you pull the worms out of the eyes, or diethyl carbamazepine. That would be a really strange type of treatment. Dracunculus, mutanesis, and dracontiasis. Dracontiasis is caused by the guinea worm, which affects residents in the India, Middle East, and Central Africa. The parasite is carried by cyclops, a microscopic arthropod commonly found in, again, standing water or still water. Okay. After ingesting the contaminated water, okay, the larvae are freed from their cyclops, their host, and penetrate into the subcutaneous tissue of the intestine, where they form highly irritating lesions. After effects from the World Health Organization and the Carter Foundation, cases have dropped from 3.5 million in 1986 to 24 in 2015. So it's been a big reduction. That's been a progress worthwhile. 3.5 million to 24. And it'll soon be eradicated from the face of the earth. Trematodes are flatworms with ovoid leaf-like bodies, have digestive excretory, neuromuscular, and reproductive symptoms. They lack circulatory and respiratory systems. Okay. Animals such as snails, fish, usually the intermediate host, and humans are the definitive host. Blood flukes. Schistosomiasis is a prominent parasitic disease. Okay. Adult flukes live in humans who release eggs into water. Early larvae develop into freshwater snails into a second larva. The larva penetrates the human skin and matures into the liver. Adults migrate to intestines or bladder and shed eggs and get chronic organ enlargement from that. These are the blood flukes. You get a leaf-like structure. Okay. Again, this is the blood flukes. This is their fourth cycle here. The cercaria phase is released by snails and burrows into the human host. This is the form that burrows in the host after it leaves the snails. These are your blood flukes. Cystosoma mansoni, trematodes, with a long, slender female worm, a cradle within the groove right on the ventral canal, okay, of the thicker male to facilitate mating. This is the female. Let me get a different color here to mark it out. This is the female worm, and this is the male worm. The male worm has a groove that the female fits into to facilitate mating. You can see how it kind of loops in here. Trematozoes, zoonotic origin. Phonorchus, there are cycles between mammals, snails, and fish. Humans are affected by eating inadequately cooked fish containing the cercaria. The larvae crawl into your bile duct. They mature there, shed eggs into the feces, and then the snails become infected. Okay. Phaseolia hepatica are cycles between herbivores, snails, and aquatic plants. Humans are affected by eating raw aquatic plants. The fluke lodges in the liver from those. This is the liver. You can see the infected parts of the liver here. Paragonemus, Westermania, cycles between carnivorous animals, snails, and crustaceans. Humans are infected by eating undercooked shrimp or lobster. Okay. Intestinal worms then migrate into the lungs. The organism that causes elephantitis has an enclosed digestive tract. So what causes elephantitis? That's a ringworm. Remember, the ringworms have a complete, they're completely encased all the way down to opening, and they have a digestive tract that runs completely through. So they're completely, ringworms are completely encased. So that would be true. Okay, tapeworms. All right, let's talk about flatworms here, the type of tapeworm. They're long, very thin, ribbon-like bodies composed of sacs, proglottids, and scolex that grip the intestine. Each proglottid is an independent unit adapted to absorbing food and making and releasing eggs. A proglottid is, here's your tapeworm, here's its head, and here's its tail, and it's got segments. All these segments make up the body. I'm not a great artist, but every segment here, this is a proglottid. Every segment has a sac of eggs, and it's used for replication. Okay, it's used for absorbing food and making and releasing eggs as the proglottids are shed. Okay, principal cause of human tetaniasis is the Tetany sanguinati and the Tetany solium, are the two types of flatworms. The Tetany sanguinati, this is what they look like. They're ugly things here, but this is what they look like. This is a beef tapeworm, similar to ones found in the human body. There are up to 2,000 proglottids. Remember these little segments right here. This is a segment, this is a segment, this is a segment, below the head and the tail. Those are each of those segments. Those are the proglottids. Humans are the definitive hosts. You can see the Tetany solium, tapeworm. Scolex is playing 4 suckers. These are the suckers right here. 1, 2, 3, and there's a 4th one on the exact opposite side. And 2 rows of what's called hooklets. So the hooklets grab in and hold into the intestinal cells. Okay. The sanguinati, the animals are infected by grazing on land contaminated with human feces. Infection occurs from eating raw beef in which the larval form has encysted. Becomes cystic can travel. In humans, larvae attaches to small intestine and becomes an adult. Causes very few symptoms, vague abdominal pain, nausea, and it has proglottids in the stool because they're shed. Once they release their eggs, the little segments are shed down. Okay. This is the generalized diagram of the life cycle of the beef tapeworm, T. sanguinati. Okay. You have your encrusted larvae. You ingest it, eat uncooked beef, goes into the small intestine here. Small intestine starts to mature and grow longer and longer and longer. And these little sections, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, these are the proglottids. Okay. You shed a proglottid and it releases, once these are shed, they'll suddenly release more eggs. The eggs are in your feces. Feces are then fed back into the cow in an infected area and come back into here and complete this into the next person. Okay. The pork tapeworm, Taenia solium. Okay. The pork tapeworm infects humans through the ingestion of Cisterceri, which is the encysted larvae or the egg. In cysticercosis, eggs hatch in the intestines, release the tapeworm, larvae that migrate to all tissues, okay, and become encystic. They form that cyst again. Most damaging if they lodge in the heart, in your eye, or in your brain. They can cause seizures or psychiatric disturbances, depending where they lodge. This is what they look like, how they're lodging in the tissues. They burrow their holes in. You can see it inside the tissue. Arthropod vectors and infectious diseases. These are the arthropods that bite or carry the infection from person to person. So arthropods have an exoskeleton and jointed legs, includes arachnids and crustaceans. Many must feed on blood and tissue fluids during their life cycle. These are your ectoparasites. Medical importance is transmitted infectious microbes in the process of feeding by biological vectors. Common arthropods. Okay, you can see the different insect vectors here. The different diseases, malaria we talked about. Filariasis we talked about. Dengue fever, West Nile fever, yellow fever, Zika virus disease, and encephalitis. And this is the type of microbe that causes them, and this is the distribution where they're found. Okay, the same thing here, same kind of disease, the bubonic plague. Okay, that was actually found worldwide. Typhus, murine typhus and epidemic typhus, relapsing fever. Okay, Hodges disease, we talked about all those so far and where they're located. Okay, Rocky Mountain spotted fever, Lyme's disease. Okay, and relapsing fever and where it's found. And this is the Borrelia spiked Right, so arthropod vectors include insects, mosquitoes. Mosquitoes require an aquatic habitat, usually standing or still water. Okay, females take blood meals, transmitting the disease of malaria, filariasis, and dengue fever. Fleas are highly motile. Let's go all over the place. Flattened body, they feed on warm-blooded animals. They carry zoonotic diseases. They carry the plague and murine typhus. Lice. Lice are small, soft, attached to the head and body hair, feeding inconspicuously on blood and tissue fluid. They release feces that contaminate the wound, epidemic typhus, and relapsing fever. Okay, there's a mosquito, you can see feeding, and look at the belly. You see all that red inside its belly? That's being engorged, that's filling up. This is a flea. As a flea feeds, this is what it usually feeds with. This is which punctures the skin, the epidermis, and you can see the blood that's been inside the flea, that's been feeding on. Okay. Lice, oh yeah, louse. This is the singular of lice is louse. So this is a louse, you can see how engorged it is. And feeding as it's been embedded in the hair, in the scalp. Okay, arachnids as arthropod vectors, ticks. Ticks feed on vegetation and attach to the host on contact. The larvae, nymph, and adults get blood meals by piercing the skin of the host. The hard ticks, ixodid, are small, compact, rigid bodies, transmit bacterial, rickettsia, and viral diseases. The soft Argus head ticks, flexible outer bodies, transmit relapsing fever. And this is your arachnoids. These are the ticks. And you can see this is the size of the tick. And as it feeds, it gets bigger, bigger. And you can see how engorged this tick is after it's fed.
Bed bugs.
What's that?
Those are bed bugs, right?
Yeah, well, they're type of bed bugs. Yep. And they can really fill up. And this is the bottom, the dorsal view to ventral view of the soft tick.